Once Rav Herzog felt that he discredited the Radziner cuttlefish. Mr. Hashem will see what the yeshuvim might be on it. But he had to search for a new candidate. He had to search for a new Techelet, for a new chilazon. It's important to note, this is sometimes misunderstood, and that is that the Gedolim in the time of the Radziner all disagreed with him. Kemat kulam. And they didn't do it on the basis of anything to do with Rav Herzog's research or his outcome from his thesis. They all came before that, well before that. And they had a lot of kashas and a lot of tainus, and they disagreed. And the Aruch HaShulchan in Siman Tes writes, since we were scattered around in Golus, ein lanu tcheles, ve'ein anu yoydim mizeh klal. V'chol tzitzis shalanu lovan. We only have lovan. Umikol mochim, anachnu mekaymin ha-mitzvah ketikuna, tekvar nizbayer, the tcheles, eino ma'akeves es ha-lovan. The tcheles is not ma'akev, you're yaitzel lechatchila. There's not b'shleimus. V'lochein mishim mevatel mitzazu, onshe merubah, the lovan. V'da, shezeh shonim sfurais. It's a couple of years. She'echad ispoyer, shemotza achilozoin. Somebody, the Radziner, was inspired, that he was proud of himself, that he found the chilazon. V'osam imenu tcheles, v'himshich acharav eiza anoshim, and he had some following. Ach loy hoya loy shomeya migdoylei hador, u'miklal Yisrael, v'nizbatel hadovar ad kiyovoy goyel tzedek b'mheir v'yomeinu amen. So the Aruch HaShulchan already earlier in his time said that the Gedolim didn't listen to it, they had tainus on it, wasn't accepted at all amongst Klal Yisrael. But Rabbi Herzog discredited it based on science, and he had to search for a new one. And what he decided was, after his much and research to do with archaeology and many scientific proofs, he came out with two candidates to the new chilazon. The first one was the Murex trunkless, which is we'll see that's the new one today. It's the Naya Techelet, the Naya chilazon. Whenever you go into a store in Eretz Yisrael and you say you want Techelet, you can ask you want the Radziner or the new one. So the new one is the Murex trunkless, which really came to life about 30 years ago. Rabbi Herzog already, in his time already, said that that's a very mistaberdik candidate. And we'll see Behemshich that it didn't start from him. There was Achrayim already in the 1600s already that Pashtus might have referred to the Murex trunkless as the Chilazon HaTcheles. However, Rabbi Herzog, again, he pushed away the Murex for the most part. He said it does not shtim with kemat, none of Chazal's simonim that they give for the Chilazon. He also had a taina. This wasn't his main taina. He had a taina, but they weren't able to get any dye from the Murex to color blue. It only came out purple. And so that was another reason that he said it's mavur in most Rishonim. There are some Achrayim that hold that the Murex, that the Chilazon, the Techelet might be purple, but it's muskim that it's blue, which is also a slight of a taina that some of the Achrayim had on the Radziner. The Radziners was a very dark blue, pretty much dark blue, and the Rambam and others seem to say that it's like the afternoon sky on a clear day, which is much lighter blue. And so Rabbi Herzog came up with what he felt was his primary choice, and that was a snail, also like the Murex, it's a snail with a shell around it, and it's called the janthina. It's called the janthina. And it was based on a tremendous amount of research of Pashat Lashonis and linguistics from the ancient Roman writings and from their Lashonis. And not only that, but he had Midrashim. The Midrashim referred to the Techelet in many places as Yakantina, which is Gans V'Stabri, could be that eventually changed to Jantina. And it fit in with many Chazals. Midrashim seems to say that the Chilazon has a shell around it. And this was a snail with a shell around it. It's a brilliant blue. When you look at the snail, the shell, it's a brilliant blue. and it produces a blue secretion. What comes out of it is blue blood. And both of those, we'll see Behemshech, fit in very much with Chazal. What happens is, it's a very interesting thing. Where you find it on the Mediterranean, you find it off the coast, and it hugs the surface of the water, it goes to the top. Now, how is that possible for a snail? It doesn't have fins to make its way to the top and sort of swim around. And so the way the Rebbeinu Shalom did it is that this snail produces bubbles, hundreds and hundreds of bubbles that stick to the bottom of it, and it floats because of that to the top. So it doesn't have any fins, doesn't have any scales, but the Gemara says it does look like a fish, the chilazim. It's doimel dag, and he suggests that doimel dag means that it floats around, it swims around, unlike most snails, and that when you look at a picture of it with all the bubbles underneath it, tiny little bubbles, it looks very much like it has scales on it. And so he decided that that's his candidate for it. Like I said, even if you look in the Lashonis of the ancient writings, in the edicts of the Romans, they had gzeiros against anybody who produces tcheles, blue color. We'll see Behemshech. And in some places they refer to this gzeira, they say that you can't color anything with the janthina. So if it's the janthina, and it's called the janthina, and it was always referred to it as that, it's ganz mistaber that's what they were referring to. That it was something that they used very much in those days, in the times of the Romans, which was in the time of the Beis HaMikdash even, and later, that they used it to color and to dye techeles. The only one problem that Reb Herzog had, and he let to leave it like that, and he didn't go weiter with it, was that it couldn't dye blue. What happened was the dam came out, the secretion came out, and it was taka blue, but it didn't stick at all, didn't adhere, it wasn't adhesive to any wool. And when they did try to do it, the little bit that they were, and it didn't wash away, it always came out immediately brown. And he was never successful to get a blue dye from it. And that's where he basically left it. He left it with the option of either the murex, which he said it was probably not, and the most mistaberdik one was the janthina. Today there's a lot of people that came up with ways, and they're trying to do research and trying to be mechazik this, because it does fit in with much more of Chazal's Mikairis. We'll see Behemshech.